We are live. Let's check the YouTube channel to check if our partners are there.
Okay, no water here.
Not yet.
Milagros and Federico, you can open the YouTube channel and silence it to check the comments.
Okay, great.
Hi,
I guess
Beatriz. How are you?
this is morning. Mm, okay, I can see people. Okay, three people watching now, so we are not alone. Good morning, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, Beatriz, Bruna says morning. So can you see? Okay, yes.
Let's wait a couple of minutes. Apart from us four, it's just Beatriz and Bruna, or is it anyone else there?
No, just Beatriz and Bruna, yeah.
Okay. It will be recorded anyway, so. Claudia, hi, how are you?
Hi, Claudia. Santiago, there's a question for you.
She's fine now. She's fine now. It was just um, a bad night and a bad day last Saturday. So we went to have her checked, and everything was fine, luckily. But these first health issues, let's say, they are quite scaring for us as new fathers, parents. Sorry.
Okay, I guess we can start.
Okay,
We're,
so
we're past 5 minutes. Okay.
okay, so shall I start, Emiliano? Are we ready? Yes. That's it, Beatrice. You are right. Everything seems the end of the world. Every noise, every little movement. Hi, Annie. How are you?
Hi, Ernie.
Okay, so let's start. Let's go. So welcome everyone to today's episode of our podcast. In this episode, we will be discussing why it's essential for us as teachers to move away from teaching these skills in isolation, as Rebecca Osford mentions, and instead embrace an integrated approach to interwoven approach. So we will draw from Rebecca's Oxford influential work, the study that she discusses a lot of things about this integrated approach and the old isolated approach or segregated approach. We will discuss her arguments for combining these skills in a way that actually reflects real life communication, let's say. So this is a table of contents. We have the introduction, the division of language skills, the traditional segregated skill, the old segregated skill approach, the communicative approach, and an integration of skills. Then we will deal with the integrated skills, the types of integrated skills. the, Both they are content-based instruction and task-based instruction. Then we will go on to some tips on how to integrate the language skills and how to teach receptive skills, then specifically teaching listening, teaching reading, then teaching the productive skills, teaching speaking and pronunciation, and a conclusion. Okay. So let's go with the division
Okay.
of the language skills. Emiliano, you want to start?
Okay. Before starting and talking about this integration of skills, we are going to categorize the macro skills into two categories. Okay, receptive and productive skills. We can say that receptive skills is a term using for reading and listening, and where skills where meaning is extracted from discourse. And we have, on the other hand, that productive skills, the term used for speaking and writing. These skills are the ones where students actually have to produce the language themselves. And according to this division, many authors mention that receptive skills involve processing and understanding language, while productive skills include creating language. Um, it's important to highlight that although these are categorized or divided in some way, they are part of the language. So in real life communication, the receptive and productive skills work together. And as Harmer says, they are both sides of the same coin. So productive and receptive skills.
Great. So let's go to see more about how to bridge the gap between receptive and productive competence. Okay. Krashen proposed in 1982 proposed that in language teaching, more effort should be devoted to developing learners' receptive competence and he claimed that learners' productive ability will arise naturally. So if you focus in working in the receptive competence, then productive ability will will arise naturally. But then Jack Richards, Professor Jack Richards, he wrote many books that probably you may have used in classes. He mentions that something that we as teachers already know from experience, that learners often find that their productive skills are well below the level that you like them to be, despite reasonably good comprehension skills. So they have a good level of comprehension, but they are not able to produce in the level that they would like to produce. So let's go with what recent theories mention about this thing. These recent theories of second language acquisition no longer assume that productive skills will arise naturally, as Krashen mentioned, from comprehension skills. These theories mention that two factors are necessary. Sorry, if we want to reduce this gap between receptive and productive skills. That is the noticing and focused output. So noticing, we have the noticing hypothesis, and with the focused output, we have the output hypothesis. Okay, we will talk about these two authors and their hypothesis. So Schmidt proposed that for learners to acquire new forms from input, from language they hear, it is necessary for them to notice such forms in the input. The idea is that we won't learn anything from input we hear and understand unless we notice something about the input. We have to be conscious of some features of the input, and this may serve as a trigger, okay? Activating the first stage in the process of incorporating a new linguistic feature into our language competence. And then the other factor that is necessary to bridge the gap between this receptive and productive skill is the focused output, as Swain mentions the output hypothesis. Swain proposed that successful language acquisition requires not only comprehensible input, but also comprehensible output. Okay, what we say, what we produce has to be comprehensible. Language produced by the learners that can be understood by other speakers of the language. Swain also suggested that when learners have to make efforts to ensure that their message is communicated, this puts them in a better position to notice the gap between their productions and those of proficient speakers. So we have to push them for them to notice that. And this, according to Swain, fosters second language development. So let's see what the old theories, the traditional segregated skills approach.
Okay, they make some history of this traditional segregated approach. And we can tell you that traditionally, language skills were taught separately in the English classroom, with a belief that mastering each skills independently would lead to a better overall language proficiency. So they separated listening, writing, speaking, and reading, and they teach that separately. Okay, and the early focus was, as I said, and Jing says, the skill taught separately to accelerate learning. The discrete approach is also called the language-based approach, where they suggested that teaching language separately could be better. And another approach is the grammar translation method, which focused on grammatical competence through reading and writing, and often neglecting the listening and speaking communication. These approaches focus more on structure and formal rules rather than communication and interaction as we will see later.
That's right. These traditional courses, ESL or EFL courses, they laid a heavier emphasis on teaching listening, speaking, reading, and writing sequentially, let's say, probably making some jumps and revisits to further work on each of them. But it was, as also Rebecca also mentioned, language for language's sake. So you have to learn language not for a meaningful purposes, but for language's sake. So let's now take a look at their research insights on the segregated skills approach in ESL and EFL. So the research, this research is mentioned in the Rebecca Oxford study. The researchers who supported this discrete teaching of language skills, so working only with listening, then with writing, and then sequentially with all the skills. They believe that ESL and EFL learners can attain complete command over one language skill due to focusing on only one language skill. So if you can manage each of the skills separately, then you will be able to have a complete command over the language. Then it was also believed that this approach would enable the learners to become an accurate user of language. And as a matter of fact, as Sad and Maggie mentioned, despite having a sound knowledge of segregated skills, the learner were not able to communicate in actual communicative situation. That is to say that probably you worked a lot on writing, you focused on the writing skill, but you were not actually able to communicate in an actual communicative situation because you didn't have the communicative competence. So the conclusion is that, as Rebecca also mentioned, it is possible to teach language skills through segregated approach. It's possible to evaluate skills isolated. Is that what she mentions? However, this approach could be failed to prepare learners for actually talking and communicating in an actual communicative situation.
Okay, now let's go into this communicative approach and the integration of skills. And we can say that the communicative competence shifted the focus, as Hinkel says, shifted the focus to real life language use. And we can tell you that the rise of the communicative approach brought a major shift in language teaching, emphasizing the importance of using language for communication rather than simply focusing on grammar and vocabulary. And it is clear that in real life situations, people use multiple skills at once. For example, in a conversation, we use listening and speaking. And another example could be when we read a paper, an article, or a book, and we take notes from the book. We are using reading and writing. So we don't use one isolated skills at once. We use more than one. And another example could be in when we prepare an exam for Cambridge, for example, and we prepare listening. Okay, we do the listening, but we take notes. We use writing. So we are not using the just listening. We use listening, writing. Okay, we use more than one skills. And the integration skills. As Oxford says, work together to overall proficiency of the language.
That's right. These skills they don't work in isolation. They work in tandem, as Oxford mentioned. That's why you can see the picture of the bike there. This way, if we work with the skills, with all the four skills together, this will better prepare learners for authentic communication in any context. So let's now work with the integrated skills approach. So, what is this integrated skill approach? Well, Rebecca Oxford explains that the integrated skill approach is a teaching method that emphasizes the interwoven development of the four primary language skills. We have listening, reading, speaking, and writing, and the other associated skills like vocabulary, syntax, and pronunciation. Okay, so we also read the Brown, who talks about this integrated skill approach. He states that this is a perspective, the integrated skill approach, that views the four language as a unit and not separately, like we saw earlier in the segregated skill approach. In this approach, the skills are integrated during instructions, and unlike the segregated skills or language-based approach, as Rebecca also mentions, where learning was isolated for specific skills. Okay, what are the benefits of using these integrated skills? Well, we have several advantages, including exposing learners to the complexity of English, promoting real content learning, tracking progress in multiple skills simultaneously. This will take some extra effort for teachers, but it will be more productive for them as working in this way with the multiple skills. As it mentions in the slide, it mimics real life communication. Okay, so we have an example, a basic example there, where students listen to a podcast, they write a summary, then they discuss it with classmates. So we are, in a basic way, we are integrating these skills in during our classes, our lessons.
Okay. Yes. Oxford mentions, Rebecca Oxford mentions two major types of integrated skills approaches. They are the content-based instruction and the task-based instructions. I remember in the previous streaming, the girls talked about these content-based instructions. So we'll be like briefly with this. Here, okay, they are basically, she Oxford says that these two approaches are okay, are basically designed and processed for teaching language skills integratedly. Okay, and okay, now we can move on to the content-based instruction approach. That it is the approach that integrates content and from other academic disciplines. For example, teaching English through history, science, or mathematics. Okay, we learn content, language, while learning another subject matter. This is the content-based instruction, and we have the task-based instruction, which is the okay. We focus our teaching on completing some task, okay, some real world task. For example, we can learn English for planning a trip, solving a problem. So we use the target language to complete these tasks. And the benefits of this task-based instruction is that it is a more practical method of teaching English, and we foster the communicative competence. Okay, we foster communication among students. And some examples could be, okay, planning an event, negotiation, or role play for this task-based instruction method. Okay, now let's move on. And we wonder how can we integrate the integration skills in the English classroom? Okay, and if you want, okay, in order to integrate English skills, according to Rebecca Roxford, teachers should consider taking these steps. For example, exploring the integration methods. Okay, as we've seen before, teacher should learn about various ways to integrate language skills, like the two approaches we've seen before, the content-based and the task-based approach. Teachers need also to evaluate their approach. Okay, teachers should reflect on the teaching methods and assess how well the skills are integrated in the English classroom. Teachers need to select materials wisely. For teachers, choosing the resources that promote the integration of listening, reading, speaking, and writing. Uh, it's crucial. The another point could be the integration, the skills across courses. Okay, even if a course is not focused on the all the skills. Okay, for example, the preparation for exams, where we focus for listening, speaking, writing. Okay, teachers need to incorporate skills to integrate all the skills together. Um, Okay, we can move on here.
Okay. So let's move to teaching receptive skills. Federico. Yes.
Hello, everybody. How are you? I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to teach specifically the receptive skills. So, basically, what we do in these cases is we have like, let's say, like a fixed or a suggested set of steps that we need to take in order to take full advantage of our classrooms in the moments where we are teaching receptive skills. For example, we start with the leading or the schema activation, which is basically the warmer, the activity that engages students with the topic. It could be either using pictures. We can also talk about something that was in the previous classes. Anything that can, let's say, activate the knowledge that these students already have about certain topics. And let's say they can also help predict what the content of the text would be. Now, moving on, we have type 1 tasks, which are basically to um, get a general understanding of the text. There are focus mainly in the main idea without not a full or deep analysis of the text. After that, we get some feedback or pair up group. In this but in this part we can see a certain, let's say, influence of collaborative learning, in the sense that we get students paired together and they, let's say, they also get a lot from working with other students. Now, the other activity, which is, let's say, more the detailed analysis of the text, it's the part where students review the text and they focus basically in the more specific details of the text. Also, text-related tasks, sorry, which are basically a follow-up with activity related to the text and or with some language features from the text itself. We should always address the language difficulty of the text. If we have some text with a lot of specific language, we should like take a moment and make an activity that, let's say, gives a little help we pre-teach some new words that will be very common in the text. So that is something that we can do in order to help students in the level of difficulty of the text. And I am also going to talk a little bit about the differences between extensive and intensive practices, which is something that appears in the teaching of many skills, but in the receptive ones. Okay, I'm going to talk about how that is in the receptive ones. So maybe can we please continue in the next slide, Sandeep?
Yes, just to add something to what you mentioned, Federico. These tips given by Harmer in his book, we can see that they followed a top-down approach from general to specifics, okay, to addressing specific features of language. So I just wanted to add that. Okay.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about teaching listening. So, listening has always kind of been considered like a secondary in importance skill, something almost kind of a passive skill. We kind of have this idea that it's not something that we should, let's say, not that we should, but like we we doesn't need to practice so much listening. There aren't a lot of strategies. It's something that people used to think. So, but in the latter years, we have found out that that is not the actual case. There is a lot of importance in listening, and it's more of an active skill. It's something that we can practice and we can improve on. So, its listening comprehension is essential to language teaching since it is a vehicle for teaching elements of grammatical structure and allows new vocabulary items to be learned and contextualized. It's something very, it happens a lot of time that listening is kind of the first presentation of some new vocabulary or some new grammatical structure. So it's a very important skill that we should, let's say, use it wisely because there is a lot for us to do there. Now, as Santiago said just before, there are some top-down and bottom-up strategies that we use a lot. For example, the top-down strategies, they use prior knowledge and context to understand the overall meaning. Okay, from, let's say, from the what they had before, what it's top-down. And bottom-up strategies, on the other hand, are basically the opposite. They focus on decoding sounds, words, and grammatical to understand the more specific. Also, we have interactive strategies in which we can mix them all. We can combine the top-down and the bottom-up from a different, more holistic approach. We are going to talk a little bit about what is the importance of listening to authentic audio materials, like radio, podcasts. Let's say we can also consider TV shows, some of these authentic materials. Engaging students in note-taking, summarizing what they hear, and incorporating listening activities with speaking follow-up discussions. That is kind of important because we, as we were talking about integrating skills, we are not just trying to only thought one skill. We try to always combine them. So that's also there. Can we continue, Sandy? Great, thank you. Now, there are three ways to convey messages in a bi-directional and interactive communication. We have the linguistic, let's say, parts, which are the words. Why do speakers choose the words that they choose? And then we have the paralinguistic, which is kind of how the vocal meaning of the texts, which is like the speaker's attitude, the tone quality, the rhythm, stress, etc. And finally, we have some extra linguistic features, which is kind of the body language, postures, everything that we communicate with our body, with our hands, with our movements, let's say, the language which is not spoken, let's say. Great. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of with the difference between intensive and extensive listening. This will also appear later when we are talking about the reading part, because they are kind of it is in both of them. Now, the intensive, it develops. The idea is to develop focus on specific details. The focus, like the way that the students can get information which is specific, not just the gist of it. They are usually short pieces of audio. The intensive listening is what we consider like classroom activities, whatever we do on the whatever we do on the class itself. So, like what we use some pieces of audio that we get online. That is part of the intensive listening. It requires a higher degree of focus. Okay, everything as we put it in this chart, when we counterpoint it, when we counterput it with the other listening, it is more clear. The material is specific. It's chosen by the teacher. Okay, they do not just get whatever material they want. Okay, and the student has an active role. It's not just immersed in the communication and the language, but they also it's the active feature of listening, let's say. Intensive, that is intensive for one part. In the other part, we have the extensive listening, which is basically all the listening activities that happen outside of the classroom. Okay. One important thing about this is that the teachers have a very important role that in that they need to encourage students, because this is like listening practices on their free time. Okay, something that we all do as English teachers or students teachers. We watch a lot of things in English, we listen to a lot of things in English, but we do it on our free time and just for the love of the game, let's say. Okay, so that is some extensive listening that we practice every day. Okay, now the difference between the audio, the materials in this case, is like they are longer. Okay, they are, for example, TV shows, 20-minute shows. They are podcasts. We listen to podcasts that last 2 hours, some things like that. Okay, the main idea is to improve what is called listening fluency. Okay, the idea of listening fluency is something that is very important in extensive listening, because we are trying to get exposed by a more simple everyday language. Intensive listening, on the other hand, we have some more specific language. A specific language from certain, I don't know, we have a listening activity about a doctor that did certain procedure in a certain way, and we have a specific language. In this case, it's more like everyday language. it has a more relaxed feeling to it, and the materials they are not chosen by the teacher. In this case, they are chosen by the students, and the student which also have a more immersed role. They are immersed in the language learning opportunity, let's say. They are not so active, let's say, in this part. And as I mentioned before, it's what happens outside the classroom. uh, Now, some things that the teachers can do in order to try and get students to get into this extensive listening, they can they or we can facilitate some audiovisual for them. We can recommend a lot of things for them, and what we did after that do is that we can ask them to keep a journal, to write some things that they like. Perhaps what is something that you liked from this show that you see. What is something that you think will happen next on the next episode? So we have a lot of, we as teachers can can think a little bit of how we can take an opportunity to be an opportunity of a normal time watching a show and transform them into an education or learning opportunity. And great. What I want to still, yes, exactly. When we, let me, okay, still speaking in English during the breaks between lessons could be considered extensive listening. Yes, because basically what we are doing in that moment is that, as I mentioned, they are moments in which, in your, let's say, free time, you are still putting the effort, and you, at the same time that you are practicing listening, you are also practicing speaking. So that is something quite useful in that regards. Okay. In this case, now I want to talk about a little bit that the idea of listening can also, let's say, evolve into an audiovisual activity. Okay. A lot of times it happens that you think that the listening activity, only listening, you can use it only as listening. But if we take, for example, an episode of any series that you like, and you put it in the TV for the students, and you take that opportunity to, for example, you put a scene of the show, and you you play it in mute, and then you ask the students, well, what do you think they were talking about in this part of the show? Why do you think they are in this room of the house? Why do you think this will happen? Okay, the idea is that we can also use media, visual media, to help listening, teaching listening in this case. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about these different techniques that we can use. Sorry. Now, first we have the fast forward technique. In this case, you play a scene from a show, and you play it like when we play a voice message on WhatsApp that we play times two faster. We do it like, we play it like that, and we try to ask the students, what do you think happened here? What are they talking about? You try to guess based on that. That is one fun activity. I have done it, and it's really nice how to see how involved they can get. Okay, the fast forward is one technique. Then we have the silent viewing, which is as it sounds. You play a scene muted, and you ask, "What do you think they are talking about?" Guess. Tell me anything that you think. Great. A different one. We have the freeze frame. You choose any scene again, you pause it in a specific part, and then you ask, what do you think is happening here? How can you, how do you think the scene is going to continue? Then continue a partial viewing. In this case, you get, you cover a part of the screen, and the student guess. Continuing, we have pictureless listening. In this case, you don't show basically visually what is happening on the scene, but they listen to what is happening. Maybe they listen to people in a concert, or people running on the square or the gym, whatever. Okay, this is all trying to be as, let's say, imaginative as possible with these techniques, and therefore, in that way, getting the students' attention easily. We have another technique that is called picture or speech, which in this case, it's quite fun, this activity, because you put the one part of the class looking at the screen and the other looking at the wall, and what the students that saw the TV, they need to try and communicate what is happening to the people that didn't saw the screen. And the last activity, which for me is quite interesting, is the subtitles activity. I'm guessing that we all been in this situation. We were watching a movie. We were watching the movie. The audio was English and the subtitles were in Spanish. And a certain scene appears, and we get the sense that the subtitles are very different to what the actual actors in the actual language actually said. Now, the activity is based on that idea. You put one scene and you say, based on the and the subtitles, what in the original language they were actually trying to say. That is an activity that if you choose very carefully, the scene will be it will be a very fun activity for students to do. And now I'm going to talk a little bit of an idea of a sequence of listening activities, a listening lesson sequence. Thank you, Santi. And this would be kind of the idea of this will be one example. We can start by having students given some pictures of a story, and they have to place them in order, that in the order that they think is correct. Okay, many pictures, they look at them and they try to guess the order. Once they do that, they get in pairs and they kind of compare answers and try and think different, or either they change what they choose, or they get in the same what they originally choose. After that, they listen to the story and check what they got. Once completed, they listen again to note some specific phrases of interest. Maybe they can listen again and underline certain phrases from, I don't know, the comparative, for example, in one text, the superlatives. The idea is basically that we really use the materials that we have. And finally, they can role play some serial scenes. So that is the listening part. Now we can continue to the reading if no one else has any more. Do you guys have anything to say about what we talked about so far? Okay, great. Now, teaching reading. We are going to be talking about the other receptive skills in this case. And we are going to talk a little bit about, for example, some strategies we all have in a moment in our lives. Learn how to skim a text and scan. We know that there is a big difference. We skim the text when we try to have a first grasp of the idea of the text. What is the main topic of what we are going to talk about? And scanning is when we get more specific. Okay, we go from the big to the small. And we're also going to be talking about the difference between intensive reading and extensive reading. Another thing to note, pre-reading activities are very important because they kind of activate the schemata on students' language center, and they help them predict the content and set certain reading goals. Okay. And the post-reading activities, they are quite good in the sense that you summarize the information that you got. It helps discuss the ideas to, let's say, be very sorry. The post-reading activities is really helpful for students to let their new information set in, and they can connect the information to real life experience. Please go to the next one, Santi. Thank you. Now, as it happened as we already saw in the listening part, there is kind of a distinction between the intensive and the extensive reading, but it's more or less the same. Okay, in one, the intensive part is mainly focused in developing how to get specific information from texts. The materials are chosen by the teacher. The class is very teacher directed, okay, and it's designed to develop specific receptive skills. And the extensive, it's again the same. When you do things from your own interest, it's not something that is sent to you. You are not assigned by a teacher to do some things. It's like when you go to the feria and you see a book that is in English and you buy it just because you can read it and nobody sends you, nobody made you do it. In the case of extensive reading, it's at school. There has to be certain things, certain circumstances must be met in order to for the teachers to produce an environment in which students have the, let's say, the urge to get involved in extensive reading. Something very important is you need to have some good reading materials. We maybe have been in some situations in which we see a book which is kind of simplified for let's say a lower skills level student. It's not the same if you have a book which is only understandable for people with the proficiency level. It will not be as, let's say, interesting for students to get as a, let's say, more simplified version of Harry Potter, for example. Okay, you have to be able to, let's say, start up a fire in the students that they need to, let's say, satisfy reading. And another very important thing is that the role of the teacher, it's it's essential because we lead by the example. If we say that we are happy that we've got a new book, that I'm waiting for my 10 minutes break because I want to read the new book that I got and it's quite fun and everything. If we make it seem cool, it will be cool for them, let's say, in a certain way. Can you continue, Sandy? Right. Now, a model of a reading lesson sequence will be as follows. The teacher starts by giving students a letter. All students receive a letter from A to F. Okay, and then all students close their eyes. Students ask, the teacher asks for students with the letter A to open their eyes, and he gives them a word from a text that is going to be worked on later. Okay, let's say, for example, lion. Then letter A closes their eyes, open letter B. Cage. B closes their eye, open C. Fire, and then you continue, and then you continue, and then the teacher puts all they puts them in groups with all the letters. Then we have a student A and B and C and D and F and all like that, and they then discuss the words and predict based on all the words that they know what the text is going to be about. Finally, they report the conclusions to the group, and after that, they receive the full text. Now, with all the full text that contain the words that we gave them before. In this point, students are way more engaged in the activity. Okay, and that is just the half. We are just in the middle point of the lesson sequence. At the last step, not the middle, but we have a couple more, one more. As the last step, students are given, for example, 10 true, false, or doesn't say sentences, and they choose depending on the text. This last activity also can be used to check grammar, understanding, or some new vocabulary. And if you see in this reading lesson sequence, we mixed a lot of skills like speaking, listening, and reading, and therefore the experience is way richer in language. So, great. I think that's it from my point. I don't know if anyone would like to add something to the receptive skills, but I think we are completed by that. Thank you.
Okay, now let's go to productive skills. Santi, can you? Thank you. In productive skills, we have speaking and writing, and we have a procedure that we are to follow certain steps for in order to allow students to feel more comfortable with these skills that are a little bit more difficult, let's say. First, of course, we have a lead-in in which we engage students with the topic. It's the typical warm-up, and here we activate prior knowledge or experiences, and we help to create an environment in which they feel safe. Okay, then we have the task set up. Okay, and Harmer here gives examples of activities we can use. For example, acting from a script. We use a script dialogue to help the learners practice speaking, but in a controlled way. Okay. Then we have communication games in which we engage learning in fun, interactive activities that promote spontaneous speaking. Okay. We have discussions in which we encourage students to share opinions and ideas through a structure or an unstructured discussion. Okay, and in this case we can give both sides of the discussion. Then we have prepared talks, like for example, when we deliver a presentation in which they prepare previously the presentation first with a chart, then they make a short paragraph, and then they prepare the exposition. And then we have questionnaires in which we use surveys or questionnaires as a basis for conversation and information exchange. This can be in groups. We give them things they have to find in the class. For example, I don't know. Find what are your classmates' food tastes. So they have to go around the class and ask each classmate, and then they share the what they found. And in here we foster daily conversation. Okay. Then we have, for example, role plays in which we encourage students to act on real life scenarios, which helps them practice the use on different social contexts. Okay. While this happens, what we have to do as teachers, we are facilitators. We monitor, and monitor doesn't mean just looking what they are doing. It also means listening, active listening, and helping them when they need to. Okay. Then we give feedback on both the content and the language, focusing on positives, never on negatives. Okay, because in this way we encourage them more. Okay, you did this very good. How about next time we add a little bit more of this? Then we have a follow-up activity that offer additional activities related to the task to further practice. This would be a post speaking activity, post writing activity. Okay, and then we teach coherence and cohesion using linking words, discord markers. I, for example, have like flashcards with um, phrases to express opinion, to express agreement, disagreement, things to help the students structure what they are saying. Okay. Then dealing with difficulties. One of the things mentioned in Celsius' book is, for example, paraphrasing when students struggle with certain words, and actually repeating, using repetition to help with the difficulty. And then we have language support, which is pre-teaching the key vocabulary that they are going to use and practice during the lesson. Okay, so they don't feel like if you give them a text or something new, they are like, oh my god, what is this? I don't know what this is. Maybe you can highlight certain words and make a vocabulary section for them to feel more at ease, let's say. Next one, please. Okay, let's talk about teaching speaking. When teaching speaking, there is a big dichotomy, which is between teaching fluency and accuracy. In Morse's book, we can see three authors that talk about this, and they have different perspectives on what to teach, or if we should teach both, or make emphasis, sorry, in one of them. Nowadays, teachers tend to focus more on fluency. Why? Because we are using more and more CLT, for example, and if the student, for example, is supposed to say the car is black, but he says or she says car black, we understood, the student was able to communicate. Okay. However, there are certain contexts, for example, a speaking exam, or when they are giving a presentation, in which accuracy is very important. And accuracy is scary. It's scary for students. Why? Because, well, you need grammar, you need some linguistic patterns to follow. And so what we can do with this is, for example, providing materials that are authentic, okay, that are, for example, a TED talk. They have to listen and then preparing a speech about that, so they can get used to the pronunciation, and uh, they can get little by little, like Federico said, used to the how natives speak. For that, we can use TV shows, music. For me, music was very helpful into getting pronunciation, reading books. Like I already say, watching TV shows, and uh, for to keep a balance, there's one of the authors that says we should keep a balance between these two, so we can combine this fluency and accuracy fight, and we can combine them and encourage students to communicate naturally. For example, I, in my classes, in my lessons, uh, encourage students to speak all the time in English. For example, can I go refill the bottle? Can I help you? Can I erase the whiteboard? Um, then during the breaks, that they also use it, like, can you peel me the apple? Can I go to the toilet? And this gets them more and more used to using the language, okay? And then we can do more control activities for them to get to gain accuracy, okay? Like, for example, listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say and how they say it, okay? um well, and this helps, of course, with pronunciation. I, for example, exaggerate what I'm saying. uh, for example, if I'm saying I like pizza, I like pizza, I don't like broccoli, I don't like broccoli. So in this way, we foster pronunciation and it's fun for them, it's engaging, and they don't feel so nervous, because one of the most one of the scariest skill is speaking, because sometimes you have to stand in front of all of your classmates and give a presentation. And I've seen it in the practicum, they start speaking blah, 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 very quick, so they can get over it and go sit down, because they are nervous. So we have to um, uh, give them time, correcting the pronunciation, but in a way that it's not doesn't seem like an attack, like you did this wrong, but instead like, okay, let's all practice together, let's all get better at this. Okay, next one please. Okay, let's talk about teaching writing. Next one. Okay, writing has a process. We cannot ask students to write an essay from scratch without going through different steps before. For example, first we can start with a brainstorm of ideas, right? Let's say we are to write an essay on environmental issues, right? And then we start getting ideas. Okay, big companies polluting the air, the cars, the all the waste that goes to the water, and we start collecting ideas from them. Okay, so we get them involved in the process. Then, for example, something I do at the practicum is a chart in which, for example, we say, okay, what is global warming? Why it is produced? How can we help? We have different structure questions that then will lead to a draft of what they want to write. We can revise it. In groups. Maybe they can exchange their drafts. We edit them, and then we produce the final one, because if not, it's very scary. We have different types of writing, right? We all know emails. Oh, my mind went blank. Essays. We have reflections. We have I don't know, many types
for and against, reports,
reports. Thank you.
descriptions, whatever.
Yes, thank you. So we need to teach them how to extract how the structure of each of them, but without being aggressive and scary. And for that, we take certain steps, so it's not intimidating. Okay. Then we have different genres, and we need to teach them how to get into that genre, how to be persuasive. If we want to make a leaflet, trying to convince others, for example, that drinking water is healthy for the body. We all know that, but we have to persuade people what vocabulary, what verbs, what adverbs we can use in order to do that. And peer review is very important in this, because we always have in our classrooms students who know a little bit more than others. So if we sit them together, they can exchange their thoughts, and they can like unite knowledge and exploit it. Okay, they can learn from each other. Some of the things that are mentioned in Marcia's book are, for example, that when we are producing a text, okay, we need to also teach the grammar rules, and grammar is always boring, let's say, to learn. So we can do it with the fun activities, like, for example, when I was teaching the verb to be, I used a boat, and the students had to paste the flag of, well, I am. The flag was am. He, she, it, and they had to paste is. So we have to prepare like previous activities for them to create the writing. And we can also practice error analysis. For example, we give them a text and they have to find the errors, and then we are teaching grammar without being, okay, an example, this is the structure, da 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 da. We are doing it in a softer way, let's say. And Harmer makes emphasis on well, handwriting, okay, because we have a problem nowadays, which is that many students have terrible handwriting. It's almost impossible to read what they produce. Okay, so to practice that, maybe once in a week, we have a separate class book, a notebook, sorry, and we practice writing until they manage to create a readable handwriting, and that they practice, okay, if your hand gets tired, that you don't stop, that you continue. Also, spelling is very difficult, is a very difficult. So we can prepare activities for them to practice certain words that are commonly used, right? So and also this is a problem I had, which is that in Spanish we have we use a lot of punctuation, right? We use a lot of dots and commas, and in English it's not like that. So we need to teach them how to properly separate sentences, paragraphs, so that is properly structured. Okay, this is in a more formal writing environment, right? because then we have the daily writing, and we don't expect them to do everything structured, right? And well, then Harmer says that in order to practice all of these, it's useful to have portfolios or journals in which students can practice every day, like a diary, and practice writing. Today I went to school, I had lunch, I played football with my friends. So they can practice and practice and practice to get from the smallest and simplest way of writing to the complex one, right? Which are the formal ones. Okay, and I think that's it. Pronunciation we already mentioned, that is uh, after this. So I don't know.
Okay. I wanted to add something related to what you
Yes,
mentioned. I have some thoughts about feedback and the importance of feedback for us as teachers.
yes, of course.
It is a must in any productive skill lesson, because after all, why are we asking students to produce something if we are not going to help them to improve upon it? So it is important to recognize that feedback and error correction are not the same thing. That should be quite clear. And we should, as Harman mentions, there are two types of feedback that should take place after speaking or writing. We're talking about productive skills in this case. The content feedback and then the linguistic feedback.
Yes,
And content feedback should always come first, because sometimes we are too teacher centered and we forget to provide content feedback, and we have to be very careful to give a good content feedback if we expect our learners to communicate and potentially, open up about their own lives. If they are writing about something about their own lives, then the meaning is very important. It's primary, and we should pay attention to that. And then after some feedback on content, then we can move to the linguistic feedback. I just wanted to mention that because sometimes we are too focused on giving the feedback and making error correction more than feedback, and we forget to give content feedback. So just to add that, okay, so we
yes,
can
yes,
move
of
now.
course. We need to be constructive when we are giving feedback and not destructive.
That's
Uh,
right. That's right. So let's move to teaching pronunciation and associated skill.
okay, we already mentioned some of pronunciation, okay, but let's get more into depth in this. Um, this has two parts: the segmental features and the suprasegmental features. Okay, we might remember these from linguistics and language. Okay, when we are teaching segmental features, we teach vowels, consonants, and how they are articulated, right? This is from phonetics. Um, and then when we teach the suprasegmental features, we focus on the stress, the rhythm, the intonation, and the patterns to ensure a natural speech. And also, going back to the speaking teaching, that we actually convey the meaning that we intend to, right? It's not the same if we place the stress in another word, or in another um, uh, in another part of the word, my mind went blank there. It's not the same. We might not convey the same meaning. Also with punctuation, right? It's not the same if I say, for example, give me the or no, open the window. Okay, the tonality, the intonation there. Open the window. We are being like aggressive. It's not the same as I've said, open the window. Can you open the window? Okay. And this is to practice this, we need to go through repetition drills, okay, shadowing native speakers, like I mentioned, using tongue twisters to improve clarity, and reading aloud exercises and pronunciation games help students to become more aware of their intonation, okay. Something I use very often, and I think we all do, is when we are going to correct something, instead of reading ourselves the activity, we ask them to read it, because this is a way to foster the pronunciation. And when they say, for example, he instead of he, we said, okay, everybody, let's all repeat he. So we can promote the pronunciation. I think this is it. I don't know if anyone wants to add something.
No, that's right, Milagros. I think if we don't have any questions, we can move to the conclusions. Okay. So let's go. Well, as it says in the slide, the idea of this podcast was to reinforce the importance of integrating the 4 language skills in our lessons. As by doing so, we are mirroring real-world language use. Okay, we have to remember that this integrated skill approach. In this approach, we as teachers have our primary goal is to help students develop communicative competence, and this requires the use of normal, real-life communicative language instead of just practicing one of the skills in isolation. We have several benefits if we have several benefits if we use this integrated skill approach, and probably the main one is that the skills are interlocked ideally as they do in everyday life. Okay, so Emiliano, I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
say
and we
something.
encourage you to use this integrated skill approach in your practice, okay, in your practice as a teachers and in your practicum. So probably for the final visit, you can use a task-based instruction approach and make students to use all the, not all, but more than one skill in this final task of your lesson plan. If you have some idea of a real life task for the final visit, you can tell us, and
Yes,
just
last year, from talking about our experience, last year we first worked with a segregated skills approach, just focusing on one and planning a lesson. In my case, I think I chose reading And then during the year, we try to work with this integrated skill approach, trying to integrate at least two skills, and then moving on, trying to integrate the four skills, as in real life situations. So in this way, if we incorporate all of them, our students will be better prepared, let's say, for authentic communication. Okay,
Yeah, for the real world. Yeah.
that's it.
So, people, any comment, any suggestion, any idea for a task-based lesson plan?
So this is the bibliography that we used for this podcast. That's it. We want to know if you have any questions. Let me show this question. At least post it here. How can you relate these theoretical considerations to your own practice? How would you assess your own teaching approach based on these concepts?
Okay, I guess we can integrate these concepts through real life scenarios, proposing students real life scenarios and real life tasks where they have to solve a problem, or probably could be where they have to do a role play, so they have to speak in real life uh, communication.
Yes, sometimes we may focus our lessons on one or two skills, and I think that what we have learned here after reading Oxford and Harmer's theories is that we need to to try to mimic real life in our lessons and not just focus on one of the skills. Try to incorporate all of them. This will be better for our students. They will have a more meaningful and communicative lesson. It will be easier for them to translate what they learn to their everyday life. So what I take from this from preparing this podcast is more self-awareness for next lessons and for planning next units or lessons, taking into account that we should incorporate all these skills in our lessons to make it more meaningful for them. So, do you have any other questions? Okay. I hope that you liked the ideas that we shared with you today. I hope to see you soon in another
Okay.
podcast.
Yeah, thank you for attending, for listening and watching, and see you in the next streamings. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
thank you for joining us.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.